Hey, very good morning, good afternoon, good evening. My name is Sean.
This is Alex.
And you're listening to another episode of Coaster Kings Radio. And today's episode is all about Nanjing, which is located in the Jiangsu province of China, not too far from Shanghai. And this is our 7th episode now of China theme parking and what else. So if you haven't listened to the previous 6, which include planning a China trip, a couple of Beijing parks, and then Shanghai Disney, the parks in Chengdu, including the Taoyuan clone, and then Chongqing and Chongqing Happy Valley, then definitely check those out. And while we're at it, wherever you're listening, if you are a frequent listener, we would really appreciate a 5-star review, whether it be Spotify or Apple Podcasts or wherever you're at. Leave us a review, and that'd be awesome. And today we're going to dive into Nanjing, which is home to several theme parks and some culture. I guess we'll kind of start off with where we stayed. So we came into Nanjing from Chongqing. So we took a plane, and then we stayed at the Marriott Nanjing South, which is close to Baijiahu Lake. And just in the little area we were, which is kind of south of most of Nanjing. It wasn't quite city center, but I really liked it. It was they had an entertainment complex there called 1912. And it was an area with the restaurants, and it had a Ferris wheel. And they have a giant park right next to the hotel. It's called Phoenix Park, and it's kind of traditional where like you go there at night and everyone's dancing. There's all these people just dancing in the square. It's very nice. Chinese. Like as soon as you kind of go into anything more suburban or residential, you'll find that in every park. I feel like every night, or even at the malls, there's people set up with speakers, and all these little like dance groups are dancing to their own music they brought. And Phoenix Park, we walked through that night, just like that, very pleasant. And then there's also a big mall right by the hotel where we went to a big arcade. Yeah, you want to talk a little bit arcade, I guess?
I got my whole life.
That's a big thing for Alex, yeah.
My whole life at this arcade. They had a massive variety of coin pushers, which, like, I'm a big coin pusher fan, and a lot of these were, like, regional exclusives, like, made in Japan specifically for the Chinese market. And we played this 2 nights in a row. Yeah. We played Marble Fever.
We bought a lot of points on this like little card. You know, you get like a little swipe card for an arcade.
And it was really difficult for us to acquire points. Like we needed help with an associate because we didn't have international. We didn't have Chinese Alipay. That was like what was necessary, or was it WeChat Pay? It was there was some method.
No,
of payment.
We had Alipay, and they wanted us to use WeChat Pay, which we don't have. But we almost never.
And like
the
arcade is literally like sponsored by WeChat, so like that's the only method of payment that they accept. But Westerners can't download WeChat Pay, so like the first staff member just straight up said no, and then I asked for the manager. And I was like, "Can you please help us?" And the manager was like, "Oh yeah, sure," and like did it for us, like no problem. Sometimes it pays to be a Karen because this guy who didn't want to help us, I think, just like didn't want to be bothered because once I got someone else involved, they were like really chill about it. And as a thank you, I bought like too many points. But no regrets, because like we had the time of our lives playing.
Yeah, we spent 2 evenings at this arcade. But it was just cool because this one was like themed to like a theme park and the roller coaster and whatever. And
so yeah, it was
one of the machines seemed kind of rigged, and it was giving us a lot of bonus points.
There was 2 sides of the cabinet, and one cabinet we only played for a couple minutes because it was like not paying out the same way that the other side was. The other side was like programmed on like easy baby mode, so like we were tearing it up. And so it's called Marble Fever because it's like a coin pusher.
No, it's Marble Mania.
Or is it Marble Mania?
I think it's Marble Mania.
Something like that.
I think it's Marble Mania. It was way cuter of a name.
Yeah. And it's sort of like a coin pusher, but instead of using coins, they use little glass ball bearings.
But yeah, the fact that it was marbles, and even it was just a very cute look. And then when you would get like a bonus or whatever, then all the little marbles would go for like a marble
run.
It's like it was a lot more entertaining than a usual coin pusher, and it was paying out good.
My child self was just practically in a coma. Like I was so excited. But now transitioning from coma to Vekoma. Just kidding. We're not going to talk about the Vekoma until later.
Just yet. Yeah, so that was kind of the location we stayed in. And then our first day when we got there, we did a quick hit and run to Happy Valley. We'll talk about it in just a little bit, and that's just because of logistics. And we got news that Light of Revenge, which is kind of like the highlight coaster for us there, was only going to be operating that afternoon, and it was like 4 p.m. The park was closing at 6, so it was kind of it was a rush job, but we'll get to that in just a little bit. Our biggest focus on day 2 of the Nanjing part of our tour was seeing some stuff around the city. We went to the Nanjing City Wall, which is the largest accessible ancient city wall left in the world, designed by the Hongwu Emperor in 1368, which is when he established Nanjing as the capital. So Nanjing has been the capital of China in several dynasties and several windows. So during the Ming Dynasty, which is kind of what Nanjing is, really big for, so we did a lot of the Ming cultural stuff. That was the capital of China, and then again during the Republic of China in the 1920s through the early 1940s, it was also the capital of China. Nanjing literally stands for South Capital in Mandarin. Beijing stands for North Capital, and if you kind of look at the history, which I won't bore you with, it kept switching between the North and the South. Anyway, so the construction of the wall required the labor of 200,000 workers. It took over 21 years to complete. Sounds a lot like the Great Wall, where they had like millions of people building it, and it took years of adding on to it. So it's a pretty impressive wall, and it's kind of broken up now on what you can still access. But in 2012, they started letting people back on the wall and reconstructing some of it. So we accessed the wall at the Zonghua Gate, which is located on the south side of the wall. The wall is very, very big. So it was cool to walk there for a little bit. I think we walked on that for maybe like an hour. We were the only people there, strangely.
It was early in the morning, and it was broad daylight out and like direct sunlight.
Wasn't that early yet?
It was pretty
early. It was 10
early.
a.m. or something.
I mean, it was early enough that like even though it was direct sunlight, it didn't feel too hot. So it was like super, super pleasant. There's not a lot of shade on the walk, but that's okay. Like, it was a really great...
I will say I had a bit of a hard time finding it. We got off the metro, and then we had to walk kind of...
Oh, yeah.
...through some streets, and then we got to the wall, but, the wall is a wall.
It's like, how do we get
to the part of the wall where we can climb it?
Yeah.
And eventually we got there and bought a ticket. It was pretty cheap just to get on.
Yeah.
And then once we climbed to the top of this particular gatehouse that we were at, then we had the choice of either walking in the one direction, because we're kind of in the middle of that section of the wall, or the other. We took the longest direction, and then ended up at some nice park. And after which we went to the Ming Jiaoling Mausoleum, which was also in Nanjing. And so this is right by the Purple Mountain, which is kind of like the historical mountain in Nanjing, on the east side of Nanjing. And that's where the Hongwu Emperor, the Emperor of the Ming Dynasty, he's kind of the legend. He is the poor farmer boy uprising through the Buddhist system, eventually leading an uprising against, the previous dynasty, and then eventually declaring himself as new emperor. I mean, the story was fascinating, and we learned all of this
rags to riches story of this vagabond.
Yeah, he's like the coolest.
Ends up being... I mean, they could make a great movie. I'm sure there's Chinese movies made about this, but like a Western movie would be awesome too. One that's like really accessible to Western audiences, because this dude went from like living on the streets to 3 years to being a like celebrated army strategist to being becoming emperor, basically,
and then having his own
rising through the ranks just based on sheer appreciation from his colleagues and people around him, and he's arguably the most loved emperor in the history of China.
And the cool thing is, we kind of went to the Ming Mausoleum because we've been doing so many things around China, like Leshan and the Summer Palace and the Forbidden City and all this, all the historical stuff. And of course, Nanjing has a very unique history, more recent, but also from the 1300s. But we learned most of this while we were at the mausoleum, because we just kind of went there to see the giant park and Purple Mountain and seeing where the tombs were and stuff. But most of what we learned about this dynasty, I think we learned there, which is cool.
We got really lucky too with our day 2, because since we ended up jamming Happy Valley into our fly-in day, which was never part of the plan, we were going to do like fly-in and then do one park a day and do tourist stuff on the back ends of the park days. We ended up really relieving a lot of pressure on day 2.
So we had a full city day, which is nice.
Yeah, so it was like a really chill cultural tourism day, since like we knocked out Happy Valley on the same day that we flew.
Well, yeah, because this is a massive, sprawling complex. I mean, it's very typical of anything Chinese, especially emperor-related, for it to just be sprawling, never-ending. I mean, his mausoleum didn't seem to end. It was another one of those giant almost, yeah, it's hard to describe. It's just the Chinese standard of size when it comes to anything emperor related, whether it's a temple or whether it's it could be anything. It's so massive. So this mausoleum was constructed in 1381. It was completed in 1405. Took about 100,000 laborers to build, and the wall around the mausoleum is 22.5 kilometers long. It's very long. I don't know if it is not in feet. And what is that in feet? 22.5 kilometers or miles, I guess.
Let me see.
You can do that while I talk.
Yeah.
It was heavily guarded by 5,000 troops because, again, it's like...
It's 14 miles.
The whole Ming Dynasty's family is buried there. How many miles?
14.
14 miles. So a 14-mile wall around it. So that's how big the complex is.
It's just like one... It's just a parkway. It's just one.
Well, it kind of feels like a park with like
so
temples
beautiful.
and particular like little gardens. We talked about a Yew Garden in the Shanghai episode.
Gorgeous.
There's kind of like a Yew Garden in there. And then the complex has a couple things that we saw was the elephant road. It's like a giant road with all these elephant statues around it. Really cool. We went to the Seoul Tower, which is actually where we learned all the history. And that's the entrance to the tomb, which is in the mountain.
Yeah, the Seoul Tower is definitely like the icon of the project.
But to get there, you have to go through several halls and gates and temples. Like everything is set up kind of like gate after gate after gate and temple after temple after temple.
I was really
This
grateful
was the same thing for this, but before you get to the Seoul Tower.
They had this really complex timeline of the Ming Emperor's life, and it was all in very nice, articulate English as well as Mandarin. So it was captivating.
It was very museum-y, but like in a good way.
It was so much more interesting.
We were in the Seoul Tower.
Yeah,
it was really cool. But then it's so Chinese because this is like a almost 700-year-old structure that leads into the tombs of this like most magnificent dynasties, emperors, and the families all buried there.
The most
and then
beloved.
Of course you're in the Seoul Tower and they try to sell you a VR experience.
The Ming Dynasty VR adventure.
Like, exactly. It's like, you want to see the tombs? Like you want to be scared? Like here is a VR experience.
It's like a VR haunted house themed to the Ming Emperor.
So you're like,
tomb,
it's the most Chinese thing. It's like you're in this incredible
and it was jumping
complex.
It was hopping. People were into it. I love that for them.
But then they're selling the cheapest thing.
But it gets kids interested in history, I guess.
I guess that's one way of looking at it.
I loved it. I love that they're doing it. But yeah, so our culture day was wonderful.
Yeah, it was good. There were a couple more things in Nanjing I had considered, especially because during the Sino-Japanese War, Nanjing was, of course, the capital of the Republic of China, and there was the Nanjing Massacre, and things got very, very dark in Nanjing, and I had definitely considered it, and I talked to my brother about it, and he's kind of a history buff in that regard, and he definitely discussed, maybe we should do it. Maybe I'll do it with him sometime, but we just enjoyed doing the more, like, super ancient imperial China stuff on this particular trip. We had a great time, and then, of course, because there's such a big overtone of theme parks on our China trips, we're going to talk about the theme parks next. So when we got there, we got to Nanjing South, and we got to our Marriott hotel. We did our little afternoon tea because we got lounge access with our membership, and it was, we're like, let's take it slow, and then go for dinner, and then, plan out our trip. Well, we were sitting there having a cute little high tea, and then we got not so cute news is that Light of Revenge and maybe even Forest Predator, by far the two most significant coasters at Happy Valley in Nanjing, were potentially not going to be open on Friday, but they were somehow open on Wednesday afternoon. So we decided to jump into Didi and go to the park. But the park is not actually closed, so that was kind of stressful. We had to kind of deal with rush hour and try to get there, because the park closed at 6, rides closed at 5:30 or something, or some rides closed at 5:30.
We really didn't have... And
it was like 4. Yeah. It was like, all right, we're going to get there, we're going to have 30 minutes to try to get all these 2 rides. And, if we even get there with not too much traffic, because their drive was 45 minutes to an hour. It kind of kept going between the two. I was tracking it live on Didi. It was stressful. But we got there, and then we tried buying a ticket. And this woman is over here, very nice, but she's at the ticket counter the park closes soon, go another day, some rides close soon. But she was spending a lot of time telling us not to go into the park, which is a theme in China.
Yeah,
if you listen to our episodes.
Time was of the essence.
It's like nobody wants to sell a ticket.
Us the ticket.
Yeah. And at least there's a screenshot pulled up. Let's get 2 tickets.
Yeah.
Because it just kind of kept going back and forth about, just not running to sell us tickets. But we're over here, look at the clock. We have 30 minutes to get these 2 rides in.
Yeah, we had 30 minutes to get Light of Revenge, and then, an hour to get on Forest Predator, and we wanted 2 rides on Forest Predator.
So we finally got the tickets, ran in, and then found our way to Light of Revenge, which is kind of an out corner of the park. Everything is in the corner of the park here. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But yeah, anyway, we rushed to Light of Revenge. I'll let Alex talk about Light of Revenge for a little bit.
So Light of Revenge was the coaster that I was probably the most excited for, although Forest Predator is definitely up there. That was definitely Sean's most coveted of the park.
Coasters. Yeah.
But Light of Revenge is really cool because it's a modern Intamin multi-launch coaster that's based on Cheetah Hunt. And like we ride Cheetah Hunt all the time. I love Cheetah Hunt. It's basically Cheetah Hunt, but with Velocicoaster's trains. So we were like, oh, this is a big deal. Like we've gotta ride this. Rode in the back, and I was expecting like a slightly more intense version of Cheetah Hunt, and it was actually really like the same. Like it was much gentler than I expected. There was a little bit more intensity, like on the run out. Intense. Yeah,
Pacing was similar. Though, it was a good.
Yeah, it was definitely like the parts like coming off of the top hat, the tree top hat thing. Like that run out to the far end of the ride was like definitely more intense and had much more modern profiling and stuff. And like the 0G roll was really much more of like a 0G roll and not like a barrel roll, like a slow roll the way that Cheetah Hunt is. And then there's no brake run on this either. So like kind of in the vein of other modern launch coasters, instead of having the elevated brake run and then descending down into the riverbed like on Cheetah Hunt, this one just continues right along. The turnaround part where Cheetah Hunt has the riverbed, though, is like so much better on Cheetah Hunt because it just makes sense. Like it's all articulated by
the rock
work and stuff. Like it's purposeful there in a way that on Light of Revenge it just seems kind of random. And then the second launch on Light of Revenge, I was expecting it to be more punchy, but it was like very, very gentle. And like Cheetah Hunt's is too, but I think even Cheetah Hunt's might even have been a stronger second launch.
I will say I like the sci-fi aesthetic of Light of Revenge. It was a very modern look. It was very sleek trains. They had it's almost like an art installation that you can ride. I feel because it was terrainy. There was definitely drops.
Very sci-fi.
And you have to have. There's a couple of upgraded moments that are on the ride that I think are better, and that is particularly when you get off of the Cheetah Hunt tree, as I call it, and you dive into the tunnel. There's actually like a tiny little speed bump underground, and that's a great little moment. And then you fly around the rest of the track, and because everything is gray, the supports are gray, track is gray, trains are white, blue, and gray, and then you've got some of these really like these weird, almost like tunnel shaped arches, or you have these tunnel shaped like structures you go through. It's a very sci-fi look, but I kind of liked it. I really thought the look was very, very nice.
The ride was incredibly stylish.
It was very stylish.
That it was situated in its area. Everything in this park was built at the same time. It's a brand new park. So like all the areas and the coasters and stuff are all really nicely integrated with each other. So like with Light of Revenge, it has like a bit of a Star Destroyer sort of like we're on some sort of a spacecraft.
That's the Star Destroyer is kind of like the overarching look of the area. That's kind of like a big thing hovering over it. But it's not really the ride though.
With the two flat rides and stuff, it's like you're kind of at this like space station type thing, and then the coaster is all sprawled out in front of it. Another aesthetic choice that they made that I thought was really cool is that the 0G roll is directly underneath the airtime hill after the second launch or the third launch. So, like, it's one single structure, and it looks very clean and very, very, like, just a fabulous aesthetic there. But, yeah, really good ride. It would have been cool to have ridden it again, but, like, I was just really grateful to get one ride on it, and it was really good. And we didn't have to wait long. And, in the interest of time and, like, making sure that we got our 2 rides in on Forest Predator, we were like, okay, we got our ride in. It was good. But, we also have this at home. I would still... Do you prefer... this over Cheetah Hunt?
I do prefer, because Cheetah Hunt, my problem is just the shoulder straps are so painful. I'm always in pain on that ride.
That's fair. Definitely more comfortable.
Like, the restraints are more comfortable. I think I like the look of it better. There's some, like I said, there's some upgraded moments where I feel like, all right, this is...
Yeah.
Like, I will say it flows better. Cheetah Hunt kind of has some transitions where I'm like, all right, that was a choice. It was like a unique era of Intamin where they were doing something, so I was kind of questioning.
I guess I would just say that like I expected to like Light of Revenge better, and ultimately I would say I like them about the same.
And I do not agree with that. So to continue my thought before I gave it a talking pan, is that See, now I lost my train of thought.
Well,
now I'm sad.
Find your train of thought.
Anyway, so I think overall, so like I was saying, the Cheetah Hunt, sometimes the elements or the layout is a little bit like clunky, I feel, and like you have the weird, almost like inline twist that's elevated on Cheetah Hunt. Here, it's so nicely replaced with a 0G roll that it just flows. I feel like the layout of this one is upgraded because it just flows, even though it's very inspired. You know, it shares a lot of the same elements and moments that Cheetah Hunt had. I feel like it just in general, the layout is. It's just more. It just flows better.
It's definitely modern.
The whole layout feels like it's not as divided, but Cheetah Hunt's very distinct to me. It's like this section, that section, that section. As where for me, this ride, especially with the lack of a mid-course brake run, to me it really felt like it was just one continuous flowing ride with a couple of like nice new touches that Cheetah Hunt's missing. So I will say I actually prefer Light of Revenge for comfort and overall. Just overall layout, I think it just flows better. It doesn't feel as compartmentalized in a way. But thematically, it's very different. Of course, Cheetah Hunt has more detail, it's thematically speaking. But the whole like giant terrain of landscaping and sci-fi art structures, I mean, it's totally my aesthetic. Like I love that kind of stuff.
In any case, the ride's a knockout. I mean, just a really fabulous ride. So then after we finished our ride, we went over to. We continued, so the park is one big loop, and it's actually a pretty small park overall, except that just the way that it's
very purposely laid out. Yeah, all the walkways are kind of on the outside of the park, which means that, and they're very windy. It's almost like this like purpose-built like Halloween maze, where like they have small space, but they wind it in a way where you just kind of. You're moving a lot in a very small space just to end up somewhere where you were just right next to, but you couldn't cross, you know? So it makes the park feel very big, but it's one of the smallest Happy Valleys, if not the smallest Happy Valley that I know. Which is creative, but to get to Forest Predator, which is right there, right next to Light of Revenge.
It was a much longer walk.
It was a good, like, 10-minute adventure trying to get there,
But yeah, so once we got to Forest Predator, we hopped in line. The park was dead. I mean, it was no surprise that the park was closing when it was, and like I was lucky. Like Light of Revenge was closing the earliest. We were just lucky. I got video of it running with people on it, just because like Sean like stopped for the bathroom, and I got one. It only dispatched the train like 4 times when we were there, or maybe 5. I mean, we saw it running when we walked up to it. We rode it, and then I think it took off maybe 3 or 4 more times the whole time we were there before it closed for the night. But yeah, Forest Predator was a huge priority, not just because it was a tighter, more forceful-looking version of the Chongqing Happy Valley Wind Coaster that we just rode, but...
And because there's the backwards row. But I wanted to tap in on that, on the note about the Happy Valley Chongqing coaster. So if you listen to last week's episode, we discussed this really big, one of the biggest B&M wind coasters in the world, and it's like a giant terrain swooping coaster. And then we thought, because of the layouts being so similar, that they would be similar in scope from photos. And then we drove up to the park, and I said to Alex, "Hey, look, this thing is so small."
Yeah.
And then I said, "But also look." The dive loop is in the opposite direction, and suddenly we're starting to make.
It dives under itself.
We're starting to make all these connections, and so even though the layout is very inspired, I mean, it has the same sequence of events, same sequence of elements. There are still a lot of differences, and this is like a compact version of it, almost if you had the HB World compact Wings of Glory, but then like applied the layout of the giant, massive wind coaster from the Chongqing Park and combined them. It worked so well. It worked so well. Oh my god, it was great. It was
fabulous. This ride was just to die for. I mean, we rode it in our forward-facing... I think we were in the last row that was forward-facing.
Yeah, well, we showed up and then they hadn't dispatched it. I didn't even know it was open or not because we had not seen it run
we didn't see it run.
But they were waiting for a full train. So then we showed up and there was like one row that wasn't occupied yet. So then we ran there to get the ride.
And it was... I mean, the Chongqing wind coaster was flawless, of course. But this one... felt really excellent in its own way, maybe even better. Just
I think I like this one
because the forcefulness of it and the giant corkscrew with the floating inverted keyhole moment was like sublime. And then so we rode. We're like, this is amazing. We get back to the station and we wanted to queue for the backwards facing row. And to do this, we made friends with a ride operator. We were talking about like traveling for roller coasters and touring stuff and such. And we were able to ask the ride operator, we were able to convince him to let us stay in the station to queue up for the backwards row. Because if we had exited the ride and got back in line, we were probably going to get
a forward-facing row.
Yeah, beat out by another group of people.
You know, he was really fun because he was like, "Oh, you used to be a tour guide. Like, are you here for school? Are you here for work? We're like, oh, just vacationing." And he was kind of surprised because everyone seems to be surprised when we tell them we're on vacation in China these days.
Yeah. When we tell them we came here for roller coasters, they're like,
so it was like every time we tell them that we're not here for work or for school, they're like, "Oh, wow, okay, people actually are visiting."
Yeah.
And this was no different, but he was really excited. He's like, "Oh, I'm a tour guide. Like, you know, you guys ride again. You can wait over here. We'll let you ride in the back," which is ideal because that was exactly what we wanted. We wanted to ride it backwards. And, God, it was phenomenal. So forceful. Because of the elements being so much smaller, I feel like the little speed bump after the vertical loop, I mean, it kicked your ass.
Crazy.
And then doing all of this backwards, I mean, phenomenal. It really high in my wing rankings.
It was
probably because
so
it ran backwards as well.
Yeah.
But it was just also really fun because this was the day after we rode the one in Chongqing.
Yeah.
It was really back to back. So it was like, I don't think I've ever even ridden layouts that are so similar but yet so different at the same time, like so close together, especially across, you know, Chongqing is not even close to Nanjing.
Riding two different B&M
yeah.
wing coasters back to back is not even that common, let alone these two. And
yeah, I feel like
it was just a coincidence. Yeah, we were like
I feel like I haven't heard anyone ever compared it to, so then I felt like I almost discovered that even though we know that the pictures were so different in the reality. Yeah, I really enjoyed
all we
that.
could go on. I mean, we went on Roller Coaster Database saying that like they're clones, but then
not just that, we'd also
obviously just on closer inspection, it's like, oh yeah, like this is different.
We had tracked our construction on the website, and you know we'd always drawn the parallels, but you don't question it if it looks the same. You think it's the same. Sometimes.
It was crazy because when we realized that we needed to like leave immediately and go, like I didn't have time to put contact lenses in, so I ride a lot of coasters with my glasses on, and it's not an issue. But because we were riding backwards, I was like holding my glasses onto my face because the wind was going to catch the lenses and like blow them right off. So it was like the wildest ride ever because like I couldn't hold on or anything. I was just like making sure my glasses had to stay on. So like. I'm just getting, like, tossed around, totally disoriented by this ride that, like, even though we just rode it forward, like, I'm not familiar enough with the nuances of the layout to anticipate anything. So it was, like, the wildest ride. Way more intense than Light of Revenge as a result.
And I guess for those that maybe did not listen to last episode, so the layout is, you start off with a dive drop. You've got a really big airtime hill, kind of like a giant...
Big camelback.
Like a hyper hill. Followed by a vertical loop, and then you got a speed hill, which again on this installation was particularly intense.
Mm-hmm.
Like it was wild, both forward and backwards. And then you have an elevated corkscrew, which there's a keyhole element, like Alex said. And then you have a 0G roll, turn around, followed by an inline twist, and then hop into the brake run. Again, smaller, compactor version of it, but a compact B&M is like kind of like. Think of the Batman the rides. Usually, I feel like the compactor to B&M, generally speaking, means it's also like just a forceful B&M. So that was really, really enjoyable. Like that was great.
It was,
and then we did so good on time that we still had time to go around to finish the loop at the park.
Mm-hmm.
So next, what we did was we went to Wilderness Escape, which is a very well themed Jinma mine train. This is the third on the trip because we had just ridden the one at Chengdu Sunac Land and at Happy Valley Chongqing. And so this is the same layout as the classic Vekoma mine train coasters like Calamity Mine at Wallaby, Belgium.
This was our fifth of that layout type.
But mine is the final helix. Yeah. And honestly, I think this is my favorite installation
this
of
one
these. It was just so well themed and it ran so well.
I really like the Jinma ones a lot. They run great.
They do run great.
I mean, the Vekoma ones obviously run really well too. But I don't feel like I'm missing any quality or level of experience. The only real obvious benefit is just having the extra helix at the end. But all of the installations of these rides, the 5 of which that we rode in just that one springtime China pair of visits between Beijing and this longer East meets West China trip alone, like it's just really fun. It's fun riding these rides and enjoying this layout and like seeing how all the different parks approach theming because they're all themed. And it's fun seeing how parks like enclose certain areas and leave other areas open and like different theme environments. Like this one at this Happy Valley had like a steampunk vibe going, which I really liked. luckily, I mean, we were totally, I was like euphoric. Like, we were just like on a high of successfully not only getting the Intamin, but getting the forward and backward rides on the wing coaster. Like, that incredible ecstasy of like getting something that seemed so challenging to acquire, especially given the circumstances when like we had been sitting sipping tea in the hotel like at less than an hour and a half earlier, and like now here we were, like knocked it out. And the family coasters in the park were open later than the others, so like not only did we ride stuff in priority order, but we also rode stuff in the order in which it was going to close for the night. So like once we had our 3 rides on the 2 coasters, it was like it was easy. It was everything else was just like bonus. So we did the mine train, and then we continued on to the
Ocean Adventure. Ocean Adventure is a Vekoma suspended family coaster, same layout as Dragonflyer at Dollywood, or Orkanen at Farop Summerland. Thematically speaking, pretty basic. They tried. I will say that they tried.
It was cute.
But it wasn't great. I mean, like the station building was somewhat thematic. The rest of the ride just seemed kind of. I mean, it wasn't ugly. But
I love the
like
unnecessarily convoluted approach to the ride that involves you like climbing stairs over the station and then descending down into the station like Space Mountain style. That was kind of fun.
Yeah, there was absolutely no reason for it either.
Yeah, it was just there. It was just like convoluted for the sake of being dramatic. But yeah, these are great rides. Always fun to ride. The only one.
It went well, actually.
This is the only other one that we've ridden besides the Dollywood one, isn't it? Of this layout.
Yeah, and I enjoyed the fact that it had that like station flyover moment where they actually just made it a big tunnel. I don't know, the ride was really wasn't bad.
I love these. So that was a hit, and then at this point we were now racing against the clock to ride the last operating coaster in the park before the whole park closed for the evening.
Which is the Family Boomerang. Same layout as the new one at Kings Island.
Which we hadn't ridden one of this layout, so we were like, okay, cool, new thing. And then we get there, and they're like, you guys are too big to ride.
So there's like a little scale. I think the max weight was like 70.
Yeah, he just
70 kilograms.
He's like, you guys are too heavy. Which like
70 kilograms, I think is like 100 like 60 pounds. Like it's nothing.
And I was like, okay, whatever. Like we were still completely victorious by most, if not all, measures, and if they're not going to let us ride the kiddie coaster, oh well, whatever.
That is what it is.
But it's funny that like this park has a weight restriction on their Vekoma Family Boomerang when like the Happy Valley Park that we were at the day before also had a Family Vekoma Boomerang that did not have a weight restriction.
Yeah, like I literally wrote in the show notes, some ridiculously low weight maximum, so we laughed and dipped.
Yeah.
We had
a good laugh with the ride up, and then we were like, okay,
it was like just laughing and we just laughed.
It was
not deep at all.
We were already so like awash with wins for the evening that we were like, oh, okay, no worries.
Yeah, so overall, the park was actually quite pleasant. Like I said earlier, smaller park, and the layout is designed to make it feel really big. Like you really have to move around a lot of scenery objects and a lot of rides to get around the park, despite, again, it not being that big. Theming-wise, it's on par with the Sunak Land parks, I would say, which is praise, because some of the older Happy Valleys are very sterile. They're kind of like a Cedar Fair, Six Flags kind of vibes.
Yeah.
Maybe even more Cedar Fair because they're just sterile and colorful. But this one really did have more theming, like the Sunak parks, like Wuxi Sunak. However, just like any Happy Valley park, I feel like the quality of the theming is just a little bit lower. The peeling of the paint,
just seems like it's aging rapidly.
Like it is the newest Happy Valley park, I think.
Park's 3 years old, but it felt like it was 10 years old.
And that goes like that in China a lot, and this was no exception of the rule there. But yeah, overall had a pleasant time at the Nanjing Happy Valley park.
We were there for less than 2 hours, knocked it out.
Did good, and I mean the highlight of that park for sure is Forest Predator.
Yeah.
I mean, we love a good wing. We love every wing, almost. I feel like I don't discriminate among the wings. But this one really did stand out. It's like, like Phoenix at Toverland in the Netherlands? That's just like that. It's just, sometimes size doesn't mean shit. It's just a powerful little wing coaster that really, really knocked out the park. And yeah, I really enjoyed Forest Predator. I would go back just to ride that.
Yeah, I would love to go back to those parks.
At some point, in a couple years, yeah. Alrighty, so now we're going to talk about our next park, which was, I think, really the highlight park that we have been looking forward to.
Trip, yeah.
So back in 2020, when they were announcing it and building it, I did like this really big article on it on the coasterkings.com, and we talked about all the realms, and it was kind of fun now seeing the reality and seeing what happened to the park and how truthfully they were to what they were promising. And the park is massive. It's very highly themed. It is. I always feel like it should be getting more attention than it is.
It's enormous. It's hybrid enormous. Indoor-outdoor park that also includes a massive hotel, a water park.
I don't think the hotel itself is actually open.
Yeah, the hotel I think is dormant.
There's a big hotel in the background that is open. That's kind of iconic. It almost looks like a beehive.
Hotel,
the honeycomb.
Yeah.
So for this particular park, I kind of want to go around a certain order that I did on the notes. So we'll be. I'll just jump off there with how the park is split up. So you enter the park. The park is almost like half indoor, half outdoor, and it's a giant circle, which is an indoor. So it's like a giant circle of 4 rounds that is indoor, and then in the middle you have all the outdoor attractions.
I guess they really only have 5 outdoor rides.
Yeah, and exactly. And even that is not even that outdoor because of the caves. But anyway, you enter through what they call the Dragon Valley town. Gorgeous entrance, set up for mass crowds. I mean, it felt like a Disneyland almost quality entrance, and it felt like there was quality, which is sometimes what's missing.
Yes.
They'll have like big ambitions, but here it felt like the money was there when they built it. And when you enter, you go into this kind of like a realm with like a giant screen, almost like up at the B level, like
Vegas.
And then either you go right to Storm Beach, which is the water park, which is the indoor and outdoor section, or you can go left towards Fantasy Future, or you can go straight ahead, and that's where the central area of the park is, which is home to a big cave system they built called Cave Wonderland. And behind that, you have Rainforest Realm, which is what we spend a lot of time in because Jungle Dragon is part of that realm. But yeah, the concept called for a few major attractions that never actually ended up showing up. But we still had a great time. Like there was supposed to be a flying theater in the Rainforest Realm that didn't become reality. But we're going to talk about some of the rides in the park, and we'll start with Star Tours. The name is not the only knockoff. Yeah.
So Star Tours we actually rode toward the end of the day. This was like our part of our victory lap. We were like, well, now that we've conquered the coasters, let's focus on any other special, like we did the water rides and the coasters, and we were like, is there anything else special here that like really needs our attention? So we walk up, and the obvious marquee attraction for the future fantasy area is this ride called Star Tours. It has like this really cool entrance with like a big LED screen of like a space, like a wormhole. We're like, okay, whatever this is, it's going to be impressive. And it turns out that it's like a giant Transformers, Spider-Man style dark ride
with very strong inspirations.
Really, lots. Definitely wears its inspiration on its sleeve. I'm talking like not just borrowing from the ride system, but it felt like they definitely took a lot of story elements from both Spider-Man and Transformers, and also Jurassic Park and Skull Island.
In the Flight of Passage, at one point there's a bunch of banshees. You're on the banshee. Like it was just like, I mean, it was.
They're
very,
big on banshees here
inspired.
because the rainforest area also has them.
Banshees. Yeah.
There was even some definitely some Little Mermaid elements too, because some of the practical effects in some of the scenes was like
I think they really didn't know what they were doing, because at one point you're on a freaking banshee flying around fake Pandora, and then
you turn in the ocean,
and then you turn, and then the whole transition's in the ocean again, and it was a lot of noise. It was a very overwhelming ride.
It was
sensory overload. Like, oh my god, I still remember like at one point I had to look down because I was like, there's so much happening in my face, the noise is loud. I mean, this is honestly, I don't get overwhelmed like that, but this ride was sensory overload.
A spectacle.
It was something.
It was like, with all of the different rides, there was like 7 or 8 different Orlando rides that it referenced, and I was like, this ride packs a 2-week Orlando Universal Disney vacation into a 5-minute ride.
Yeah, it was wow. It sure was a tour.
A full whirlwind tour.
Yeah, of the stars.
Of Universal and Disney.
Shit.
It was so great.
And then right next to it is Dragon Race, which is a Jinma dueling family coaster, which is built on top of the Cave Wonderland. Has a tiki theme, and it was surprisingly forceful, very smooth, very comfortable big trains.
Yeah.
And let us ride twice. I didn't know it was open because you had to climb all these stairs to get there.
And we exceeded the weight and the height restriction, but the ride-op was like, yay, riders.
And then we got to ride twice, which was very nice of them.
This park was empty, you guys. Like, we didn't ride anything with anybody else except for the Shoot the Chute. We rode with some school kids. But everything else we rode that day, we were the only people in our respective vehicle.
Yeah, I guess we can kind of start. Should we actually just discuss the whole saga of the day instead?
Yes, yeah.
Let's just switch to the saga of the day. I'll have you saga it.
So of course we walked straight to the Shockwave, Jungle Dragon, the
well, we
Vekoma
get in and they say,
Shockwave.
like, oh, not all rides are open. And we're like, oh, okay. But we didn't know what it meant. They said, like, oh, 3 rides aren't open. Of course, that meant 2 of the coasters.
Yeah. They also have a Jinma version of the Mauer Sky Loop in the future fantasy area. That was... not only was it closed all day, but we were also too tall and too fat for it. So, like... And we've tried on 2 other occasions to ride the Jinma Sky Loops at other parks, and both times the parks were like, absolutely not. So, like, we were not betting on this ride being accessible to us. In fact, only the Vekoma Shockwave was the ride. Like, that was the only ride that we were technically physically allowed to ride. So the fact that we got on the kiddie coaster was a huge surprise and bonus, and like a really nice experience for us in the park. Yeah, so the Dragon Coaster, Jungle Dragon's in the very back of the park. It's testing. They're like, come back later, basically. We're like, okay, so then we go into the rainforest area of the park, the indoor rainforest area, to kind of hang out in there for a bit.
Yeah, the rainforest area is actually called the Rainforest Realm.
Rainforest Realm.
Which is, of course, a name.
And they have the focal point for this area.
It's called Miracle Island, which has the Jimma Rapids ride in it.
Rapids ride.
Yeah.
And it's not a true rapid. It's really more like, because there isn't like rapids in the flume. It's a big rapid slide. So like you dispatch pretty much right into an elevator, and then the elevator deposits you into a slide that felt like a car accident. And then you splash down into the flume, you get really wet, and then after that it's like a very scenic drift, like almost like one of those little like garden boat flume rides like that like Europa Park and Hansa Park have. But anyway, so after we toured the indoor area of the park and kind of looked at all the different rides, we went back out to the Shockwave, because it was still testing. It was testing nonstop. We went back out there and kind of hung out in front of the ride for a little bit, and they said they were troubleshooting. There was a weird, they said, quote, like a weird sound was coming from the ride, and they weren't sure if it was going to open. We waited out there for quite some time, and like school groups of kids kind of came and went. The management for the park showed up and looked at the situation. I mean, they had all hands on deck. The platform was full of mechanics and ops and stuff. Eventually, they gave up. They were like, one of the ride operators was kind enough to translate for us that they were like, if we can't figure out the problem by this point in time, X amount of time in like 30 minutes, then like we're going to send ops home. The ride's going to be closed for the day. Which eventually happened, and like we were devastated, because this was, like, of all the new coasters on the trip, this was the one that I was the most excited for, and Sean probably too, right up there with Forest Predator. So, like, we were really bummed, especially since the ride operated this whole time. By this point, it had been a couple hours, and the ride operated the entire time. And all that they could say was that there was a strange noise, probably like a fiberglass rattle on one of the seats or something, because they had started taking off the fiberglass from the vehicles to, like, try to isolate the problem so that they could diagnose it. But
which, admittedly, I'm kind of surprised that the park would even volunteer such information. I still remember telling Alex, like, they wouldn't say this kind of stuff to us in America. The last thing an American park is going to be like, oh yeah, ride up, go ahead and share what the problem is with the ride, and if it will reopen, or if it's going to open in 30 minutes. You know, in America, or maybe even Europe, they're not that transparent. They're really not going to, like, give a timeline of when it opens.
Oh yeah, the ride sounds weird.
Yeah, or like, oh yeah, it sounds, you know, there's a strange noise coming from the ride, and maybe in 30 minutes, if it's not fixed, then it won't be open. It's like, well, they would never say that in America.
They felt bad for us. They could tell that we were there from a long way away,
dressed up in these like outfits. So I guess at that point we decided to go back into the Rainforest Realm and go to the Miracle Island area, which is the only area I think it really came to fruition from the original plans, and ride the Jinma Rapid slide that we just mentioned, which was absolutely terrifying, unexpectedly terrifying, because we waited in line. We got some ponchos because I didn't really feel like getting that wet, and the ponchos were very small. And there's a video of me that I was playing right now where I look quite relaxed.
Yeah.
But that was prior to, so the first section of the ride, so you get to the station and you put on life vests, which was one of those things where I was like, why life vests? That's interesting. Anyway, so we're wearing our little outfits and we're on the ride and we're kind of bobbling around. Like, that's kind of cute, you know, like a big tree, and then you go into the tree and then there's an elevator lift. Like, it's all quite cool. And then you roll onto the slide part, and, you know, there's a video of us out there on social media.
It's fine. It's kind of scary. We're wearing life.
We're wearing life preservers. There's no seatbelts. Yeah.
Kind of cute though. Oh! Fuck my back. That hurt so bad.
That did hurt.
Oh, that was terrible.
Now we're spinning a lot.
I feel like a car crash is happening. That's all the shit's coming in.
Here comes the squad.
No! Woo! You were Oh my god, it was
Fine.
brutal.
Everything's fine.
We start the slide and we're like talking about having a life vest on, and then at one point I'm like, you know what? I said like it's kind of scary is what I said first.
Yeah.
This is kind of felt kind of jank. And then
rides.
I had in that one motion turn, I had changed my mind from like, oh, this is kind of scary to like, oh, it's kind of cute. So I physically say, oh, you know, it's kind of cute, and I would like, and on the beat, we hit this turn, and I think my back is broken. It was the roughest turn I've ever had in any ride in my life.
Gut checked.
It was
by
a
the
freaking
handlebar
car
ring.
crash, and that thing started spinning and spinning and spinning and spinning and spinning. And I'm telling Alice, this is a freaking car crash. And then we get to the water, and luckily I did not get nailed. Alice got nailed though. He got wet. And then the ride just kind of bubbled on for like another 2-3 minutes.
We just spent the rest of the ride like recovering.
Yeah, it was a whole thing. It was a very enjoyable ride. Actually, was it a very enjoyable ride? Maybe I'm making a statement that's not accurate.
It was an entertaining.
Experience
in retrospect.
Yeah,
because of what we caught on film, but the ride experience itself was not pleasant. it was painful.
Anyway, so we checked on the ride again on the Jungle Dragon. Of course, it wasn't open yet, and then eventually.
Well, also before we even rode, I forgot the Rapids ride was actually second because we rode. The first thing we did was we rode the Cave Wonder Shoot the Chute. That's where we got the ponchos. Remember? Because then we wore the ponchos across the park. We bought the ponchos, and it's like a whole poncho ensemble.
I guess we had been looking at the Rapids ride, and while we were waiting, because it was air conditioned, because it was kind of hot out. While we were waiting, because Jungle Dragon was cycling a lot. We were cycling all day, so we kind of look at it.
Yeah,
like,
we didn't leave that area until they told us that the ride was going to be done.
Even management told us. And then we went to Cave Wonderland.
Yeah, and then we rode the Shoot the Chute, which was really cool. It was hard to see a lot of it. Come to find out, we started in the station, as rides often do, with our boat full of like screaming elementary school kids or whatever on a vacation trip or something. Yeah. And we dispatched right into the first drop, like drop right out of the station into this enclosed splashdown and get soaked.
Absolute soaker. But before I do that real quick, I just want to mention that Cave Wonderland is like the giant central area of the park, and it's this massive cave system they built with walkthroughs and all this lighting and all these dragon-themed caves. And some of it you can't even access because they already closed it, which I guess is also very Chinese. But it's also home to a massive museum called the Treasure Hall, which we went into later. But yeah, so, and then throughout this, you kind of see, you can't even really see it that well, but you can kind of occasionally see a boat come by. You kind of hear that there's boat situation, like shoot-to-shoot situations in the caves. And so when you ride the ride, you don't actually know what's going to happen because they did a really good job building the cave system, but then not being able to see what the ride does within it. And that first drop,
it was an amazing surprise.
You would think you would see the drop in the station.
I didn't even realize. We just kept going faster and faster. I'm like, oh, it's a drop. We're dropping.
You dispatch at the station instead of like gently dropping to the water. Suddenly there's a freaking drop, and of course the walls of the cave like backsplash.
Oh yeah.
The theming was very strange. Like the cave parts with all the projection mapping and the Pandora-inspired floating islands that they also had there. I mean, Pandora was a very big inspiration point for this park, I would say. In the grand scheme.
Yeah.
And then at one point you get to a tunnel where like there's some like freaking TV character like on the ceiling fighting nothing.
Yeah, there's projection mapping.
And then there's also a lot of big fish. Like it made no sense. But it's very they just threw everything together.
Maybe it made sense to somebody, but not us.
No. But then the coolest thing is the elevator lift.
Yeah.
So inside the mountain, which is the tallest part of the cave system, there's a giant elevator lift. And then vertical, and it brings you to the top, and then you drop down a giant chute outside into the park. And it was gorgeous, very well done. I was actually really impressed with the ride system. They were running 3 or 4 boats. That they really kind of got that right. It was very thrilling and beautiful. Oh my god, the cave system, especially outside with the dragons all over it.
Breathtaking.
It was beautiful. I mean, very picturesque. We'll have pictures on thecoastkings.com where you listen to this. Because our new format of the podcast episodes is that you can listen to it anywhere you want to listen to it, wherever you're listening now. But if you go to our website, we have a player in there, and then we have photos and descriptions and stuff. So it's kind of like a mix of a very abbreviated trip report that is now just more of a like podcast about a trip, and then some supporting materials there. So go to thecoastalkings.com and you'll be able to find some photos of this ride in the park and whatever else we're going to talk about. But yeah, so we rode that ride, and then we went onto the gym route, the gym slide.
And we did the rapids ride, and then basically after that, we were like, all right, let's bounce. Like, let's get back to the hotel. We were still pretty wet, even though we were wearing our poncho ensemble. We decided to go back to the Shockwave, which was still testing.
Yeah, you know what? I still remember I was like, oh, you know what? Because there was this really clear exit gate, and it wasn't actually closed. Yeah. So I was like, what if we just took an even closer look? Just to see what it looked like.
Let's go up the exit and
take photos if we can, because at this
it's
point, it's like, you know, at this point, all we're trying to get is just photos of the ride so we can edit them and post them online, because it's a cool-looking ride. And then the most unsuspecting thing ever happened.
Well, so we had made it pretty close to the ride station as a result of walking up the exit. And somebody up there, like some park director or somebody, I think they had been watching us. This is like our third time, like walking up to the ride to look at it wistfully. And they summoned us up. They were like, the guy was like, come up. So we went up the exit, and I was like, this is what is happening. They're going to let us ride. Like, is this real? Like, is this real life? Is this happening?
It was the wildest thing. I still remember being like, what the fuck? Like, what do you mean, come over here?
Is this a movie?
At first I thought maybe it was a show, but then I started to realize that, you know, they're going to let us ride.
Yeah.
They're going to just give us police treatment. It was one maintenance guy, some manager, and some other dude wearing, like, street clothes. Like, it was very, very not open.
Very casual.
Like, it was very open. Like Alex said, fiberglass pieces all over the station.
Yeah.
And
there was bits of train all over.
And then we just hopped on, and we knew it was running in maintenance mode because those weird maintenance alarms that it does when the launch goes off. It had been doing that the entire time, and so then we get on.
Wasn't there even a maintenance guy like on the catwalk?
Yeah,
like,
there was a maintenance guy on the catwalk.
We rolled right past him. We were like, hey.
Right.
But yeah, so we got a front row ride on this coaster that was very closed to the public, and it was amazing. It was so good. This ride is so great. Forceful, airtime, comfortable. G-forces, loops. I mean, it was just a fabulous layout. If you've ridden Abyssus, or Abyssus, however it's pronounced, at Energylandia, this is the alternate layout of the ride that has lower capacity. It's a shorter ride. It lacks the first launch sequence of like non-inverting turns and stuff. It just goes right into the second major launch. But this ride has a longer second half that includes an additional corkscrew and an additional underground tunnel, because the Abyssus version has an extended series of brake runs to accommodate running up to 4 trains, whereas this one can only run probably 2 at a time. I've heard mixed reviews about Abyssus, but this ride was so awesome that, like, I think maybe having the extra corkscrew and stuff, like, made a huge difference.
So, I mean, I guess I'm going to just run through what stood out to me real quick on the ride. And that is that the launch was incredibly punchy. I mean, like, slam your head against the headrest.
The fact that you roll into it, it's a rolling launch, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. It's very, very
like,
punchy.
Boom.
And it just takes off. And then you have that top hat, crazy airtime on it.
Great forcefulness as you climb up to it.
It is incredibly smooth. The elements roll. And I think the pacing is just fantastic. The ride doesn't let up. It's airtime, aversion, airtime,
you drop into that
twist.
Beautiful giant vertical loop, and then the airtime after you make that.
Oh my god! It's like off axis. It's insane. And you have your Batwing, which you love your Batwing.
Head choppers diving under the station into the Batwing. Oh, it's just like
it's very nicely terrained, and then you have like the lagoon that it goes through, and then you have all the landscaping, and it's incredibly gorgeous ride. Again, we have lots of pictures on the website. There won't be any people on the ride because we were the
only passengers that day that didn't work for the park.
Yeah, so I mean, overall, just very, very impressed. One of my favorite coasters in the world.
Ever.
I mean, I wish it was closer because it's not easy to get to.
Yeah.
It is not even that close to where we were in Nanjing, so it's kind of a pain for a repeat ride. And of course, for China.
But it's funny because we were already planning our return visit because we knew that we would have to come back to ride this coaster.
But now,
and then when we rode it, we were like, well, we still have to come back again because this was one of the best roller coasters we ever rode.
Exactly.
We roll into the station. We're like cheering. I was very emotional. I was practically in tears. So I was so disappointed, you guys. And then
they took a photo of us, and we were very excited. Yeah. And then I asked, like, can we ride again? And then
they were like,
oh, ride in the back.
Ride in the back. It's the best.
We're like, okay, I wouldn't say no.
So then we rode in the back, and, like, the airtime coming off the top hat was amazing. Like, Oh my god.
So admittedly, this is Alex and I's first experience with these Vekoma trains, and of course all over Europe. So
it's our first next-gen Vekoma Looper, actually.
So Varop Sommerland has the trains, of course, and you've got the trains on Leg Coaster, you've got them on Abyssus, you have it on
Formula, or whatever that racing one is.
Formula.
Formula,
yeah. Anyway, so you have, of course, several installations. But first, it was the first time riding it, and I will say this may be my very favorite rolling stock. The bucket seats Vekoma is known for these days, just like on Battlestar Galactica and Singapore, like they're very comfortable. And then you have the fact that there's just legroom everywhere you sit. It almost has that like the legroom of the trains that you can find on Gravity Max, you know, the kind of almost like the B, but instead of having the giant for the boomerang kind of bulky seats, it's much more streamlined seating. I was very comfortable in both the front row and the back row. I feel like it's unusual to have that much legroom in either of those rows in any coaster train that has ever been built. And it just ran so well. Oh my god, you could feel the air, the vest wasn't in the way. There was a vest, right? Yeah, there was a vest. Yeah, it wasn't even like in the way. Yeah,
because the first coaster stateside to have these trains will be the Flash Vertical Velocity at Six Flags Great Adventure. So
we'll ride that.
I'm very eager. That ride should start testing anytime now. It might even already be testing by the time this episode goes live. Fingers crossed. But yeah, can't wait. So we finished our second ride. We thanked everyone profusely.
This was our last major ride of that trip too.
Yeah,
it was like high. Yeah, we ended on a high note.
It was the final. Yeah, it was really the last planned coaster expedition of the trip. But after this, so then we were reinvigorated. We were like, instead of bailing early, we were like, well, we're here. We got the coaster. Like, let's walk around some more.
Take photos. That's also when we rode Star Tours and we rode the Dueling Dragon coaster.
Yeah, so first we went back to the Wonder Cave area to take pictures of some of the areas that we could see midway from the Shoot the Chute ride. Walked around that. Really enjoyed that. Walked around the whole outdoor portion of the Shoot the Chute. Really covered all of the accessible midway areas in the park. Walked by the big Ferris wheel, which is like hugged by the hotel loop, all of which was closed. And then
we were testing the Ferris wheel.
Yeah,
it was a really cool, gorgeous Ferris wheel.
Beautiful looking.
One of the prettiest Ferris wheels I've ever seen in my life. Oh my god.
And then we went to the kiddie coasters. They were open. We just kind of went up the stairs. Really, we went up the stairs to get pictures because the ride is like on the second story of a themed building. So in order to see the coasters, we were like, well, let's go upstairs to get a closer look. We'll walk through the queue. And, you know, we'll let them tell us that we can't ride and we'll continue on our merry way. And then they let us ride. Great little coaster. It's too bad that only one side was open. The other side, there's only one train per side. There's no transfers or anything. And the other side of the coaster, the train was in pieces on the platform. So I guess we're just lucky that it was, like, even open at all. Like, that any of the coaster was operating, let alone, you know, that we were granted access to ride. That was the only coaster in the park open today, actually, was the one half of the kiddie coaster. And then we continued into the space, what was it called again? Fantasy Space?
Fantasy Future.
Fantasy Future,
Star Tours.
Where we rode Star Tours. And then we wrapped it up. We were like, all right, we got all of the major rides in. We got the major coaster, the major water rides, the major dark ride. We got the kiddie coaster. We called it a day. The park.
Yeah, we went back to our hotel area. And we went to that 1912 entertainment space.
We went back to the arcade for more Marvel Mania,
and we had some Mexican food, which actually wasn't half bad. It was like an Italian Mexican restaurant, and surprisingly not terrible. I mean, we saw it we walked by it a couple nights prior. We're like, oh, okay, you know, I mean, whatever. And then we were like, what if we just tried it out? Because I Googled it, or I looked it up on trip.com, because you can't really Google that. And it actually wasn't terrible. Yeah, it was pretty good. Then we went to the arcade again, and then the next day we went back to Shanghai, which that episode is already live because we kind of did it out of order a little bit.
Yeah.
And then after Shanghai, we went to Hong Kong. So our next episode that is going to be China or Asia themed is going to be Hong Kong. However, we're going to do a bit of a split because as of right now, we are on episode 7 of China-related stuff, and it is very possible that some people are not listening anymore because they're kind of over all the China stuff, or some people are like, all right, let's catch a break because we have Hong Kong, we have a Taiwan episode, we got a Singapore episode all still coming up. But we're gonna split that up a little bit. We're gonna do another trip because today, when we're recording this, we just came back. I just came back this morning from Efteling, and Alex yesterday because we took different flights home because we worked. Long story short, we went to Efteling. And so, on our layovers, and then we kind of had to orchestrate all that. So, our next episode is actually going to be like a little break of Asia, and we're going to talk about Efteling. We love Efteling, and you love Efteling, and everyone loves Efteling. And we were in the car getting groceries a couple hours ago, and I was like, you know what? We've never ever had a bad time at Efteling. Yeah. I was like, do you realize how rare that is? So we go to Efteling a lot. We go to Disney a lot. We go to Universal a lot. We go to a lot of places very often in Disneyland Paris, but we've never actually had a bad time at Efteling.
It's always perfect.
It's always been an amazing time, and even at Disney, and of course we love Disneyland and Disney World and Universal and all the good stuff. But there's been times where we didn't have a great experience, but somehow at Efteling I've never had a bad experience. Really wild. So next episode is going to be Efteling. Once again, if you are listening on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, please leave us a 5-star review, and you'll get a shout out. And we look forward to hearing you guys, or seeing you guys, or listening, whatever. How does that work? When we're on this side of the microphone?
We look forward to
having you listen to us.
You.
Yeah, speaking with you in our little home office themed to Tron. In next week's episode. Bye.
Bye.